Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. This is Firoze Manji from Daraja Press. Welcome to our show today. I'm honored today to have as our guest Ngugi wa Thiongo, who of course really needs no introduction. But let me just remind you that amongst many other things, Ngugi is a novelist, a theorist, a pioneering decolonial writer, a distinguished professor of literature at the University of California, Irvine, and so many other things. I'm sure we're going to have a really interesting and stimulating discussion. A warm, warm welcome to you. Karibu mzee.
Asante sana. Yeah.
My co-host today for today's show is Mwangi wa Wanjiru, a London-based lawyer and theorist and lecturer in law at the University of Kent and visiting lecturer in constitutional, administrative and human rights law at City University, London. Some of you may remember the podcast we did a couple of weeks ago in which I spoke to Dr Mwangi about his recent book, Black Iconography and Colonial Reproduction at the International Criminal Court. So it's a real pleasure to have you here also, and thank you for joining us, Mwangi. In today's broadcast, we'll be exploring many
by the way, and by the Mwangi is my brother Mwangi was a guerrilla fighter in the Kenya Land and Freedom Army. Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Mwangi. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. So maybe I come from good stock, you see.
Okay, we're going to be exploring a number of different dimensions, which we think it would be useful to get Ngugi's ideas on, including the idea of language as protest, language as a form of transformation, and the future of Maendeleo, progress in Africa, and all the context of the ever-encroaching globalisation. So a warm welcome to you both. Ngugi, language as protest? What does that mean?
Language for empowerment. How about that?
Whatever that means.
You know, language has been used in the language, one of the most important called technologies or human technologies or original technologies. Language because it allows us to communicate, to put ideas together. But language, like every technology, it depends on the use to which that technology is being put. Yeah. Language has always been used to either liberate or oppress. Okay. Let me give an example. In every colonial situation, the colonizer imposed their languages on the colonized, but not simply imposing their languages, they negated the languages of the people they colonized. In other words, their language was based on the negation of African languages. In other words, it was not simply teaching their own language, because when you know in a language, it gives you extra power. Okay? Yeah. I mean, English is good, French is good, Russian is good. But note, it was a teaching of English or French or Portuguese. It was teaching it on and then negating African in the process. In other words, to know English, you had to deny African languages. To praise English, you had to abuse African languages, right? The two went together. An example, we were thrashed, humiliated, given corporal punishment when we were caught speaking African languages in school compound, mother tongue. what does it mean really to punish a child for speaking their mother tongue? You're associating that mother tongue with pain, with negation. And it's true not only in Kenya, Africa as a whole. It was true in Ireland. It was true in Wales. It was true in Scotland. It's true in Australia, in New Zealand, wherever there has been domination. The dominating has always erected their languages on the graveyard of the language of the colonized.
But doesn't language represent more than just the language itself, but also the culture, the way of defining one's history, one's values, and so on? So it is deeper than merely what we call just language.
So can you repeat that question? I got the statement, Firoze.
Let me take it again. You're focusing on language, and it's a form of sort of genocide of other languages that colonialism associated with. But that is more than just the language. It is also the history of those people. It's also their culture. It's also the way they define themselves as human and make themselves as human, and therefore it's their future which is also being crushed.
You see, Firoze, I keep on saying, if you know, let me put it this way, if you know all the languages of the world, and you don't know your mother tongue or the language of your culture, that's enslavement, okay? But if you know your mother tongue or the language of your culture and add to it all the languages of the world, that's empowerment. And colonialism was not about empowerment. It was about enslavement of the mind, right? Yeah, because if you know your language and then add English to, in our case, Kenya, if you know your mother tongue, whichever it is, then add to it Kiswahili, which is our national language, and add to it English, French, Mandarin, Russian. That's empowerment. But the other way around is enslavement. You find in Kenya, it's very sad to find parents being happy that their children don't speak their mother tongue. Some of them, not everybody, it's changing now. But there was a time when middle-class parents would be very proud that their children were not speaking their mother tongue. And they would be on display. They would call their children so that they can display that they don't know. And they don't know their mother tongue. That's enslavement. You know, take the example of Kenya, for instance. You know, this enslavement can manifest itself in different ways. In Kenya, we celebrate Madaraka Day. We celebrate Uhuru Day, or what the Independence Day, correct? Now, this is a day when you think, because it's ordinary Kenyan people, workers who went to the foreign, fought for independence. You'd think that this is a day you want to involve Kenyans, you know, as a whole, you know, you want to arouse them in their patriotism. But every president in Kenya speaks in English, right?
Why?
When they have been spoken in Kiswahili, Kiswahili, at least, right? Why? On those days, why speak to a few diplomats in English and you punish the whole population and you're talking about their history, their being, right? It can manifest in other ways very concretely. In Kenya, there are schools which are run by African people with their own money to run British curriculum. Can you think about that? How, I mean, it's difficult to, I know, it's difficult to quite understand this phenomenon.
Yeah.
But other areas of life, self-confidence, self-knowledge, self-awareness. So it's more than just language.
Yeah.
The sense of being. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that comes from this idea that we actually did not decolonize properly? That in fact, when, for example, the British left, they just left the elite, which really aped the British or the French, really. So really, the people who went to the forest, for example, in Kenya to fight for freedom, they never took up the state mechanism. So essentially, what we I think, this is my view at least, what we end up having is British state still, but run by Black people.
Yeah.
At least the state. So therefore, the elite in most African countries, in a way, they see themselves as maybe white people, but you know,
not white,
and
not white people, certain white people. Remember, certain white people, right?
Yes, not working people, probably.
Yeah, not working people. They see them as white. You know, let me just put it, post-colonial is what I call normalized abnormality. In other words, post-colonial. Let me put it again. Post-colonialism, on the whole, is normalized abnormality of the colonial system.
Mm-hmm.
Because the colonial system was abnormal in so many ways when it comes to the
Yes.
So at independence, we normalize up that abnormality and we call it African, Kenyan, or whatever you want to call it.
Mm.
Yes.
So we nationalize we nationalize that abnormality. Okay.
Yes.
At the level of economics, at the level of political power, at the level of culture, at the level of psyche, of the mind. Okay. Because those are connected, my friend, Mwangi.
Yes.
And Mwangi, by the way, you know, Mwangi comes from Waki. Mwangi, Mwaki.
So this is part of then me living up to my name, you think? To make sure
Mwaki,
the fire
is
fire
Mwangi,
keeps burning.
is Mwaki, and no fire and light are the base of all technologies. The sun is both Mwaki and also light, right?
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I've learned something. I've learned the meaning of my name in the different sense. But you've touched on something which interests me as a legal researcher. And this is the idea of language used in African government and African legal systems, if you call them legal systems, but they are essentially British legal systems.
Yeah, abnormal.
For example.
Yeah. That's an example of
abnormal legal systems.
Yeah. Abnormality. Yes. Law, if you take someone to court, they must be able to understand the judge and the lawyer representing. If you take a peasant, a working person who knows only Koi or Luo to a court of law, the judge speaks to them in English, the interpreter knows English and probably Swahili, or in other words, justice is injustice in Kenya in a way the laws are operated because they operate in English.
Yes,
justice must not be seen, but must be something. What's the expression? Justice must
be seen to be done.
Well, how do you mean that Kenyans in a court of law? They go there, they can't participate in the process of their own judgment, right?
Wambat Wambat wrote a lot about the issue of the emergence of palava as a basis for resolution of conflicts and differences within communities.
Yes.
What are the possibilities for that emerging in Kenya, or has it really been crushed by the colonial system?
We had to, the foundation, our language, and by our language, I just mean mother tongue as a basis. And then we find how those mother tongues can also communicate through building. We have a Daraja system called translation, okay? Translate that Daraja. It can enable, Daraja is a good term because there's no Daraja which is a one way, correct? Daraja is two-way, right?
Mhm.
Transition. When transition
Very good analogy, that one. Yes.
When transition Daraja, it can enable Luo and Gikuyu and Gujarati. I mean, you can get someone in Gujarati, it's translated into Gikuyu. And in a place like Kenya, we are lucky also, we have Kiswahili, which is really an African language in its origins, but now has this other aspect that's known across the whole country, more or less, right?
Yeah.
South Africa,
Yeah.
Congo, Mozambique, and it's taught in many parts. Yeah. So we can make use of Swahili, but I want to make this, please, for anybody who is hearing me. There's nothing wrong with English language. There's nothing wrong with the French. They are good languages in the same way as Mandarin and Yoruba and Igbo and Luo and Gikuyu and African languages, okay? If you know, as I repeat, if you know your mother tongue or the language of your culture and add all other languages to it, that's empowerment. And we want empowerment of our people, okay? But the way you do it now, we disempower them, we negate them, right? Right?
Yes.
It's like cutting off somebody's legs and give him artificial legs or something. I don't know. Huh? It's criminal. What we do in Kenya is criminal, actually. We criminalize languages, we bat our children, we do all sorts of things against ourselves, right?
Wow, that's powerful. Firoze, just a minute. You asked something which I really want to touch on. You've asked something on peace building, which really I've written about in my monograph a bit. And the question, for example, I was writing on is this idea of taking the African elites, the ICC, a sort of peace building, or as a sort of, okay, we take a few elites to the ICC and peace is brought. But you touch on palaver, for example, as a way of people talking and bringing peace.
And
I've talked about we've always done that.
Yeah. Can I just interrupt you one thing? You mentioned ICC.
Yes.
This is international criminal thing.
Yes, I've written on it. That's what my monograph was on.
Okay, let me just, I will head it viscerally. Bush of America started a war in Iraq on a lie, okay? A lie. Millions of people in the Middle East up to now are dying because of that. Was Bush ever taken to a criminal ICC? Blair, his companion in England, the same thing. Were they ever taken or even a book opened for them by the ICC?
Yeah.
Right?
No.
It's a good idea, it's a good idea, but it cannot be used as a colonial thing on other people, right?
Really?
Like Bush, you like that guy was called,
Tony Blair, you mean?
Yeah, he was Prime Minister of England at the time. Look at Afghanistan, 20 years of killing and so on, right?
Yeah.
Are these people ever taken to court by ICC, right?
Yeah.
Gaddafi, what did Gaddafi do? Gaddafi, they killed him. NATO went there, killed him. What did he do?
Yes.
People are dying in Libya now. Thousands, millions. Why those people who killed Gaddafi, have they been taken to ICC? Right? Has a book been opened for them? Right? Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Powerful. So I was touching on those themes. But the most important idea for me is this idea that setting this course in The Hague. The Hague is obviously known for colonialism and slavery history. It sends for me this message that we still colonized, we still enslaved, we still don't have our own laws, which obviously we've had our own laws for centuries, and we resolve disputes for centuries, right? So this idea that we need strangers to come and show us how to build peace is a colonial idea, an idea that means we did not have our own laws and rules of governing our societies. So that's what I was trying to write on. But perhaps Firoze, what I wanted to touch on is go back to this idea of language, because this idea of language and the future of resistance kind of excites me. So yes, Ngugi gives us, in a way for me, the inspiration that yes, there is hope for resistance. Yeah. But where is that hope if our children in Africa don't speak our languages anymore? And how do we deal with the technology? What's happening?
That's enslavement. We enslave. We again, we have African as enslavement. Okay, let me put again the idea of normalized abnormality.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. It's our norm in Africa today. And really, until we begin to not to normalize abnormality, look at it at the basis of abnormality, we are destroying our own countries, our own future, right? But we can do it differently, right? It's, again, our languages. In Kenya, we can make sure every child is rooted in their mother tongue, no matter whether it's Gujarati or Luo or Kidawada or whatever. Then add to it Kiswahili. Right? And then any other language will add empowerment to it. What's wrong with that picture? Why don't we take what's normal and work on it, right? Palaver, we talk about palaver. How do you have palaver unless you understand each other? Mm-hmm. You can't have palaver. I mean, palaver, the whole idea of palaver is the language they speak, whichever it is, they understand each other. Mm-hmm. How do you have palaver? Okay, mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. So, but language is fundamental to our being, but not language. But what we have to really, I want to stress this. What's wrong with language is hierarchy of languages. Mm-hmm. In other words, if you say this language is higher than other, we are continuing the colonial system, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we are doing that.
Let me ask you.
If we say English was higher, now we have Kiswahili as higher, we are doing the same thing, right?
Okay, so yeah. You become very well known around the issue of decolonizing the mind.
Right.
Okay. Well, what do we actually mean by that? What are the consequences of saying decolonizing? I mean, the colonial experience was the dehumanization of people. And it was the mobilization of the people that stopped the colonial rule, direct rule anyway. So, but what does colonizing the mind mean if it doesn't involve people?
Yeah.
Before you answer that, what I wanted us to link that idea to is what does that mean, the decolonizing of mind in today's context where technology rules? Let's try to play with that idea.
Technology in a moment.
Yes. First of all, I mean, there's so many things here packed together.
Yes.
Technology has always been there. There's no community. What you call human community was enabled. Yes. Human as opposed to animal was enabled by technology. Meaning put it this way, take the human body alone. Okay. All technologies we have are really projections of the human body. Put this way, we have hands in the primary natural technology because fingers can lift things, can do that. So when you get a tool that enables to reach a fruit, which on the tree, that plant or that stick, which enables it, is extending the power of the hand, the reach of the hand. That's technology, which and it's the power of my hand. So their technologies of walking, they begin with our legs. Or technology of seeing with the eyes, or hearing. Yeah. So technology, in a way, you can see is how it is almost a projection of capacities of the human body already. If you look at technologies,
but it's also an expression of power. I mean,
of course,
nuclear bombs don't represent our interest.
But nuclear power can be used differently, right? Can kill thousands, can annihilate the earth. But nuclear power can also be used. Technology, depending on how you use technology, but it's always been with us, And technology was very, very important. All I'm saying is technology has always been the projection of the five senses of the human body, the hands, the legs. So all technologies of movement begin with the leg, okay? Of hearing, of seeing, all those. I don't go into details, okay?
Yeah.
Now, how are those technologies used? Yeah, they can be used to liberate the human capacities, or they can be used the other way around or suppressed, okay? Now, decolonization of the mind. First of all, colonize is the totality of economics, politics, culture, and psyche. All the 3 or 4 levels are connected. The economic, the political, the cultural, and the psychological, okay? The realms are connected, okay? So colonization was a totality, okay, of land taken away, labor taken or colonized, therefore using language as a way of tying the mind to the colonial system, okay, or negating the mind of the African, connecting it to, okay. So decolonization, my friend, must then be their counter process. At the level of economics, you can have economic inequalities where people are, J.M. once said, millionaires on the body of 10 million people, poor, right? So it's a level of economic, it's political, it's cultural, and psychic. It's psychic. Liberation of the mind. They are all connected, right? And that's why when we talk about decolonize the mind, it's because the mind is also a reflection of all these other levels of our being, okay? So I repeat, decolonization was economic, was political, was cultural, psychic. Decolonization must also be there, a counter to that, which is the liberation of our economies from imperial control, for instance, returning our economy to the power of the people, say, of Kenya, of Africa, and therefore political power, the power of their making decisions, the legal system also, right? And therefore our language has become important, right? The connection, because if we do that, remember, Mwangi, if we could harness the power of working people of Kenya alone, right? From the lake to the ocean and the mountain, the power of working people of Kenya, where could we?
It would be brilliant.
Yeah, let me give an answer of Kenyan history a little bit, because people don't know about this. I think even historians, I'm sorry, even Kenyan historians, if they are listening to me, please listen to this. We talk about America. America independence, remember, was the English colonists declaring themselves independent. Native Americans were never went through decolonization, even today. the same with Canada, the same with New Zealand, the same with Australia. In other words, the white settler colonies, later the same colonizers declared themselves independent. Right? And South Africa was treading the same way. If you look at 1912, right?
Even Zimbabwe in 1980.
Our Kenya, etc., was the first settler colony to reverse that global process, right? Was a settler colony that did not go the way of America, the way of Canada, the way of Australia. South Africa later followed the Kenyan model, if you like, and Zimbabwe as well. Okay? That's Kenya's place in global history. Okay? Do we celebrate history? No. Do we know it? Sometimes we don't even know it. Right? But it's a fact. You look at America, Australia, Canada, right? Even South Africa earlier of apartheid, Kenya, 1962. The Kenya Land and Freedom Army, Kimathi, right? They were the first in history to break that thread. Okay?
Wow.
Yeah. Right?
Wow.
We teach that in our classes? No. Huh? Do you look at America? Yes. We kneel before. What about the power we have already demonstrated in Kenya? What about even if we go back to the people who were the powerhouse, if you like, behind the soldiers of Kenya Land and Freedom Army? Right?
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Suppose to for that time alone.
Wow. So very, very powerful words.
Yeah. Right.
Very, very powerful words. I think that reminds me, it's just in memory of Kimathi's wife, who passed away just a couple of months, I think a couple of weeks back. And respect to all the foreign heroes who were never found, detained by the British and never found. But you mentioned something really, really profound, and that these settler countries, the USA, New Zealand, Canada, Australia, they're kind of geopolitically very powerful today, right? And in a sense, if you look at America, for example, it shapes global politics, right? And you can see the poison of these settler colonialism. When it settles, it becomes almost toxic.
Normalized. It's normalized abnormality. It's normalized abnormality on a global scale. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Nobody talks of the USA as a settler community. Nobody talks of Canada as a settler community. Nobody talks of Australia as a settler community.
So that's normalized abnormality we have, right? In other words, the colonizers themselves declare themselves independent. The colonized Native Americans, Native Canadians, Native Australians never went through that, right? Kenya was treading the same way, if you remember. You know our history, how the mayors wanted to go the way. Kenya's soldiers of Kenya Land and Freedom Army, composed mainly of really very ordinary people, working people, right? Changed, when organized, of course, changed that global trade. And you don't give Kenyan that credit. Yeah, even if we are Kenyans, even we Kenyans, we're not why can't we be proud of what we have done?
What I've been observing is that the political class in Kenya always use the Mau Mau for political gain. For example, I think they will call themselves the children of Mau Mau, or some sort of this phrase or this other, because they also want to claim heritage. But I don't think their policies really
They want
look into that heritage.
Those who use my mind that way, they call them Kenya Land and Freedom Army. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah, it is Clary Jama, or anybody else. Kenya Land and Freedom Army. Huh? Right? Yeah. Kenyan, Nico used to sing, Kenya ne foro, Riwando. Kenya as a whole is land of black people as opposed to the white highlands concept. Okay? Yeah. The idea of sharing was there,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That was used to sing. When a bean fell to the ground, it was shared among the children. Is that what we do in Kenya? Yeah.
No, we don't. But do you think that has come from this neoliberal greed where everybody needs to grab everything for themselves? This idea of us as Ubuntu, the idea of Ubuntu, this idea of we together. Do you think that is dead because of the
course,
modern
we together is a good
African?
thing. You are,
Yes.
the whole idea that you are because I am. That's a good one.
Yes.
Yeah, I am.
Yes.
But we don't have Ubuntu. Capitalism is not Ubuntu, my friend.
Yeah. Is the very opposite.
Yeah, it's of Ubuntu. Palava.
How do we revive?
Palava is different from dictatorship. Palava is give and take. Daraja, there's no one way. It's a two-way. There's no Daraja which goes one way. Remember, the whole idea of Daraja is
Yeah. So Firoze, what do you think? How do we revive this idea of Ubuntu, this idea of getting away, the opposite of neoliberal?
Our resources.
Yes.
But Africa as a whole, Africa is the biggest continent in the world. It is more resources than probably any other continent in the world. Africa continent is bigger than America, North America, South America, and Europe put together, right? Who controls our resources today? Our coffee, our diamonds, our zinc, our copper, our uranium. Who makes things with our things, right?
Yeah.
Why can Kenya, if Mama could make guns in the forest under very difficult circumstances, why can't we? I'm not saying just, we can, if we, the power of the people, as I call it, the Cameredo idea. Cameredo was literally, you can check working people, right? Yeah. Even the clothes they had on the stage were the clothes they normally wore. We didn't have costumes, they call them, okay?
Yes.
What did the Kenyan government do? As an example, they put me in prison, they erased Cameredo, right? Which is as an example. Let me give you another example. Kashamba, I don't want to, the story should be better known in Kenya. Kashamba was a bicycle repairer, a Juakali artist in Nyeri. He was a bicycle repairer, so to speak. He created he made a plane which flew. He called it Kenya One. What Charles Giorgio and the Kenyan government at the time do? They imprisoned him and banned him from ever. You'd think, honestly, common sense would tell you that they should have said, this guy is talented. Let's give him aid. Let's do this. Let's see what we can. No. Giorgio, but it's laughable. It's comical. Instead of applauding his effort and say, but let's enable you to, let's give you more assistance. No. First imprison him and ban him from ever flying again without, they do legal jargon, without aviation license, right? Right? Now, you would think that normal, a decolonized mind would have said, this is incredible. From nothing, this guy flies a plane, even if it's for 10 minutes. Yeah, let's reinforce him. Let's use as an example. Let's do this. But they imprisoned him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as they imprisoned you, Ngugi.
Well, at least, I mean, yeah. But Cameroon, this is what I'm saying, Cameroon, they banned, they destroyed Cameroon, they did also things.
I think it's helpful
here's the thing.
For our audience just to say what Kamaritu was and what it represented was an attempt to have popular theatre take control of by ordinary people to actually give voice to their history, to their future, to their aspirations. And they built their own theatre, and you played a very important role in facilitating that. And I think, we must be aware that not everyone necessarily knows about Kamaritu. That was what led to your own imprisonment.
Yeah, imprisonment. But and what happened in Kamaritu, remember, is literally working people, but also remember this, intellectuals from Nairobi also worked there who are committed to that idea. Let me just mention a few. I was there, of course, Gogoa, myself, Gogoa, there's Gogoa Mary, so the little Gogoa Mary, there's Kimani Chao, there's Somji, Sultana Somji. It was a cooperation. Somji used to come, he didn't have a car. He used to come by public transport all the way from Nairobi to work, Sometimes when he was late or something, he would sleep. The peasants, they would give him a place to sleep, okay? Right. That kind of combination created Cameroon, right? And what Cameroon did, it can be done again on a national scale in terms of our industries, in terms of anything we want to, we can do it, right?
So what is happening in Kenya today? Are there new Kamaritus? Are there new possibilities? What is happening?
I can actually say something on that because I was in Kenya briefly for a couple of weeks, and I met a group of young people who are actually going through a phase I'll call revival sort of phase. I met one musician. I don't know whether he wouldn't mind if I mention him. He's called Kwame Reggae. He's a brilliant musician, and he's come up with this cultural group called Tore Amobi, and with the idea of actually using music, theater, everything together.
Are you talking about reggae?
Yes, reggae, Kwame Reggae.
Kwame Reggae, Tore Amobi.
Yes, he's brilliant, and he wouldn't mind me mentioning him in this forum because he's a brilliant musician. I met with him. But there's a couple of other people doing the same thing. There's, for example, Firoze, there's a group called Mbozi Library, right? And they publish, like you do, Daraja Press, they publish kind of leftist kind of ideas as well. So there's a growing group of young, not just Kenyans, to be honest, because I saw this in South Africa as well.
As you know, we've published a book by the Kenya Organic Intellectuals Network, which is which are actually activists from the informal settlements around Kenya.
Yeah.
There is creativity going on.
That's the way to go. Yeah.
And I think that's it. That we need let many Kamaritus develop, because I think it was a historical representative of our aspirations, and I hope that will be a symbol for our future.
No, I agree. We can also all those things, and I'm glad that's going on. As I said, I've been away from Kenya for 50 years, so I don't really know what's going on in the ground right now. But I'm glad those things are happening. Kwame, of course, has been very good with music and so on. I think his song, rendering of the Mau Mau song, Mwene Nyaga,
Yes, yes.
Has been seen now by 4 million viewers or something like that. Incredible.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I saw that, and I reached out to Kwame, and I met with him, and he is one of these people who I think his thinking is way beyond even where I was at that age. So I was like, wow, young people really coming up with these brilliant ideas. But one thing I want to say, Firoze, is actually Kameredo lives through people like me.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing all this because of people like Ngugi. Without Ngugi, what Thiongo, there would not be me.
Yeah.
There would not be millions of Kenyans who read Ngugi's work, and we got inspired to come and do stuff like this. So Kameredo lives through us and other people, and other children from working class families in Kenya.
Yeah.
So it never dies. Kameredo will never die.
Yeah.
I think we should take the opportunity to give recognition to Ama Ata Aidu, who passed away last week, and we have Michere Mugo, who is very ill at the moment. But both have continued to work right, producing material, being creative, and so on. I wonder, Ngugi, whether you would like to say something about these two extraordinary women.
Yeah, well, extraordinary is the word, and they have inspired. Amata Aidu, well, I knew her. I knew her quite well because she was in Kenya for some years, and she was in love with, I must mention this, with Pasali Likimani. It was a crazy love they had.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. And Pasali and I, Likimani and I were at Alliance High School together, and at least together. So, but anyway, so I knew him, but I also knew about their love. It was crazy. And they produced a daughter. Unfortunately, Kimani did die and so on. But anyway, Amata Aidu, so Amata Aidu, she has this energy, right? Her laughter was always something else, okay? They were friends with Michere Mogo, actually, great friends. They were together in Zimbabwe, for instance, in exile in Zimbabwe, okay? Two extraordinary women who, of course, are a symbol of extraordinary women we have in Africa in the past, in Kenya.
Yes.
We have a history of the extraordinary women,
Yes.
in every aspect of our struggle, including, of course, the late Mokami Kimathi, the general, what's her name again? Sorry, I remember. But all those extraordinary women we had, the Michere Mogo are a symbol, and her friend Amata Aidu are symbols of that extraordinary power of our women in Kenya, women of Kameredo. I mean, that energy, women during during the struggle for the Kenya Land and Freedom Army, some of the extraordinary soldiers were the women, right? We forget the women were there in the mountains fighting. They were there in the villages, keeping the villages alive. They were in prison. They were everywhere, right? Yeah. And we should sing glory to our women all the time, I think. Yeah.
As we come to the final part of this discussion, what are you working on now?
I'm doing something very personal right now. I've always felt guilty of the fact that my mother, who was a peasant woman who could not read in a modern way or write, took me to school. But the first book I wrote as a result of education was not in Gikuyu, my mother tongue, but they were in English, right?
Yeah.
So when I was being given Catalonia Prize in Spain, I spoke my accent in Gikuyu, and I paid a tribute to my mother, Wanjiru, and I said that I'm coming home to her, so to speak, right? So I really won't translate the river between. I've done that into Gikuyu, not published yet. And I'm doing now the Weep Not Child into Gikuyu, and I'd like to do a few other books back into Gikuyu, original. Yeah, because I feel, let me confess, I feel honestly that our generation as intellectuals, the generation of Chinua Achebe, of Wole Soyinka, of Thiongo, of all those other generations, we normalized abnormality, right? Because we are the group that now more or less as if English was an African language. And although by the way, they have produced extraordinary work, I want to pay tribute to their work. Their genius is, the genius of Things Fall Apart is there. The genius of all things is there. I'm not questioning their genius, okay? But that genius was kind of enclosed in languages other than ours, okay? So I felt guilty of our generation, or like to call Makerere generation, because we're the one who normalized that abnormality. Earlier generations, even within Kenya, there was a tradition of Africans like Akarawaja writing in African languages, and there are even African language newspapers like Ramogi, like Momenyereri, like so many others in Swahili as well. South Africa, there's a whole generation of novelists in African languages. But our generation became a product of and contributed to normalizing the abnormality of the colonial system. So I want at least those two books to be back in Gikuyu as a way of assuaging my own guilt about it. Yeah.
What about Petals of Blood?
Oh, I don't know. That's what I have to get someone else to do that, because I don't know whether I'll have the energy, but even the energy, I would actually translate it also back into Gikuyu. Yeah.
Final
because,
word.
Because translation is a good thing, by the way. Translation, if we develop African languages, there's no, so we have a whole Pan-African heritage from America, the extraordinary novels written by African Americans, by Caribbean Africans, there's no reason why we can't have all that literature in our languages, in Yoruba, in Gikuyu, in Luo, in Kiswahili. Kiswahili can also act as a bridging language. Yeah, it's an African language. It also can do all these other marvelous things. We can have a book in Gikuyu, it's translated into Kiswahili, a Luo book, or the other way around. I'm telling you, if we get it right, the sky is the limit, really. What we can do with languages alone, right?
Mwangi, last words from you.
Wow, it's a challenge to upcoming thinkers like me, obviously, to start now thinking whether our next work is going to be in Gikuyu. We touched on something on a project I'm working with at the minute, which is on these very powerful Gikuyu women who fought in the Mau Mau.
Yeah.
But then after the so-called freedom, they went back to the villages. So what happens in central Kenya is extraordinary. You go to a village today and you find a grandmother who was a revolutionary.
Yeah.
And the stories are not written. So I'm trying to write those stories. I've collected a few from my own family.
Yes.
And trying to write them. But what the challenge I get from Ngugi now is, should I write these in Gikuyu? I have to really
Kikoi first, and then you can have translate to Swahili, into English, into French, into Mandarin, into Russian. There's nothing wrong with that one. Huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what's normal. That's what should be normal. Writing Gujarati is translated into Swahili. I mean, that's what's normal. The other one is abnormal.
Yes.
Normalize abnormality.
Normalizing abnormality.
Normalize abnormality.
The challenge
well, thank you very much for joining us today on this show. We've gone well over an hour, and I think in respect for our audience, we should bring this discussion to a close.
Or do we have to, Firoze? We can have this discussion forever. We have to bring it to an end.
Thank you, Mwangi. Remember, Mwangi is Mwaki as builder. Mwangi, fire a builder is the correspondent to Mombi. Yeah.
Okay. Before we go, Firoze, I should take this opportunity really to say a massive thank you to Thiongo for really accepting my invitation to come and talk to us. Really, I have to say, when you say yes, I was doing a little dance. Okay. Thank you ever so much. I hope to continue these sorts of discourses with you, Ngugi. Yeah. And I hope to meet you in person, face to face.
Remember our days in London, fighting for the prisoners in Kenya?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, my friend. It's so good to see you again. It's so good to see you looking good. Yeah. And really, thank you very much for joining us and for this contribution. So I must close this particular thing and say to our listeners and viewers, thank you very much for joining us today. We've been speaking to Ngugi wa Thiongo, extraordinary novelist, thinker, writer, philosopher, and Mwangi Wanjiru. This is Firoze Manji.
And by the way, I agree with you. Listen to the wind. It is